Job chapter 1 verse 3 describes Job as the greatest of all the men of the East. His possessions were many, his family was prosperous, and he lived his life pleasing to the Lord. But even Job, who was considered righteous by God, suffered horrific tragedies. As the first and second chapters relate, Job lost everything, and even his health failed him. His friends came advising him, but they were of no real help because they didn't even understand what was happening to him. Job felt pressed into the earth by the weight of all of his pain and sadness. In Job chapter 7, verse 4, he described the restless nights he faced as he suffered. He said this, "When I lie down, I say, when shall I arise? But the night continues, and I am continuously tossing until dawn." I haven't had very many nights like that, and I'm very thankful for it. The ones I have had are most unpleasant. Job was suffering and had no reprieve even in the night. Listen as he continued speaking in Job 7, verse 13. He said this, "If I say my bed will comfort me, my couch will ease my complaint, then you frighten me with dreams and terrify me by visions, so that my soul would choose suffocation, death, rather than my pains. I waste away. I will not live forever. Leave me alone, for my days are but a breath." If those words resonate with you now, if you are having trouble sleeping, if you're finding troubled dreams when you finally do find sleep, you need to know that Job did not quickly find a reprieve. He didn't quickly find comfort from his pain. He continued to suffer, and he wondered why his life was filled with such misery. And it's only at the end of the book that Job was rewarded for his faithfulness through all his undeserved anguish. So I want to offer you some reminders if you're going through a troubled time right now. Number one, Job's suffering was not a punishment for his sin. Job chapter 1 verse 8 makes it very plain that Job was considered righteous by God. And so we don't need to assume that because life is difficult or life is filled with misery, that somehow that is a reflection of sin on my part. Don't assume that about yourself. Second, Job maintained his righteousness through all his suffering. Job chapter 1 verse 22 and chapter 2 verse 10 relate that he did not sin with his mouth in anything that he was saying. And later, God reminds his friends that Job spoke only what was right concerning God. And that is the third that I want to offer you, that Job was rewarded because as he suffered, he spoke only what was right concerning God. Job 42 verses 7 through 17 show how God rewarded Job at the end of all of his trouble because he remained righteous. God promises rest for those who continue living faithfully during their life on earth. Now listen to Hebrews chapter 4 verses 9 and 10. There we find it written, "So there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For the one who has entered his rest has himself also rested from his works as God did from his." There's a time of rest coming for those who remain faithful to God even through difficult times and pain. So if you're suffering, if your nights are bringing only long, dark, pain-filled moments until the dawn, remember that your pain is not eternal if you remain faithful to the Lord. Suffer faithfully and seek the home that God has prepared. In Hebrews chapter 11, we read about those who were faithful and who remained faithful even through great trial and difficulty. And in verse 16, we read this, "But as it is, they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them." Just because you're suffering doesn't mean that you're unrighteous. And even in your suffering, God is willing to be called your God if you remain faithful to Him. And He has prepared a place for you to live in comfort for all eternity. Seek that place and remain faithful all your days.